We all know that software engineers love a challenge. And the prospect of building a custom-made product that you have total control over is definitely exciting. But starting out on this journey can be daunting. How exactly do you define the problem you're trying to solve? What does the perfect build team look like? And how do you mitigate risk if things don't go to plan? In this panel, we will hear from engineering leaders who have been in those scenarios, discussing their experience and sharing the do's and don'ts on homegrown solutions. So let's get started with introductions. Today, I am joined by Andrew Fong, Jennifer Voss, Reggie Davis, and Sophie Roberts, and they're here to share their experiences and insights. So I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, where you are, and what you do. And Andrew, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Rod. So my name is Andrew Fong. I'm currently the CTO at Vise, which is a financial services company. We're building the future of wealth management. I joined roughly 6 months ago in December. The team spent the last 6 months basically building out the team. The team is about 6 people. When I joined in engineering, roughly about 30 now. So we've had pretty explosive growth over the last 6 months. Prior to that, I was at Dropbox. My last role there was VP of infrastructure, where I led about 250 to 280 engineers worldwide, oversaw 25 megawatts power and space, 3 exabyte storage system, and then ultimately we're responsible for infrastructure COGS and reliability for the company. Before that, it was at YouTube and AOL. So that's who I am. I'll turn it over to Rod.
Yeah, thanks. And then Jen, I want to say hello.
Hey everyone, I'm Jen Voss. I'm coming to you from a basement bunker in Colorado. I recently started a new role as the Director of Engineering at Outside Interactive. So if you're familiar with Outside Online, that's one of our flagship products. Before that, I was a Director of Engineering at Elsevier, building software in the healthcare domain and managing development in a heavily regulated space in both the US and Europe. I'm also an organizer of Liberty.js, which is an annual dev conference in Philadelphia, which will return from its COVID hiatus in 2022. And I'm really excited to be part of this panel because I've had to evaluate the build versus buy question a number of times, especially in the healthcare space, where in terms of deciding, whether to build in-house or potentially trust your data to a third party. So a lot of times we did choose to build, and I've definitely learned a few lessons that I'm excited to share with you today.
Terrific. And then Reggie, can you say hello to the good folks in the audience?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. I'm Reginald Davis. Currently, I'm a site reliability engineer at Elastic. Previously, I was SRE at Schlumberger, where I actually worked on I can't even remember. I was at Schlumberger, and then before then, I was at Home Depot, also as a cloud engineer. I typically am the person that ends up on the build side of everything. And I'm just really excited to be here because I just would love to add some more perspective to the conversation.
Terrific. And then finally, Sophie, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joining you from a rare sunny day in Seattle. During the day, I lead measurement engineering within Pinterest, where we measure the performance of our advertising products for our partners in a privacy-safe way, which is the hot topic of 2021. Over the last 15 years, I have built, bought, and cancelled many software projects. At Pinterest, at Amazon, and prior to that at Skyscanner. And I'm excited to share my learnings and also learn from my fellow panelists about how to tell when things are going well and when a change of direction may be necessary.
Fantastic. So getting to start building a new system of any size from the ground up is a tremendous opportunity. But no matter how many times you've done it before, I don't think any of us would say it gets easy. So today, our discussion will highlight some of our panel's experiences and lessons learned that will hopefully aid all of you in shaping your next build for success. So why don't we start with a question, and I'll pass this to all four of you. Maybe can you tell us which system you've had a hand in building are you the proudest of, and what was the impact of that system? And we'll start with you again, Andrew.
Thanks, Rod. System I'm most proud of being part of building. So the problem was we had a team of engineers at Dropbox, about almost all of engineering, 600 people, that really were struggling in development environment. They could not get onboarded. It would take like anywhere between a week to 2 to 3 weeks Interns were literally crying because their development environments would break on them and you couldn't ship code. And so we took on that project, and we wanted to rebuild the development environment in such a way that it became completely impossible to break. And we set a goal of getting engineers onboarded within the first 30 minutes of joining the company, and be able to write code within those first 30 minutes. And it was a pretty audacious goal, I think, when we started this project, because we said we need to do it. Like, the business requirement is like, we have to do this in less than 6 months. We basically have to swap out the entire development environment and tool chain across the whole company and do this. So we ended up having to spend a massive amount of time making a lot of decisions around, do we build this, do we buy this piece of technology? And we spent the better part of 9 months, probably 6 to 9 months, to get it fully rolled out. But in the end, anybody writing backend code could effectively join the company, download a single shell script on their laptop, push the button, and it would allow them to write code immediately. And then top of that, basically provided them tools and diagnostics that you could push a button and it would tell you exactly what the development environment is broken. I think the very innovative thing that we did with this is the development environment was also then run through CI/CD, so it was impossible to break. So anytime someone modified development, it was basically the same environment that CI is running. So if CI was broken, development was broken, and vice versa. And so that kind of gave us a lot of leverage across engineering. So we would always know, if there was an issue with development. Took, I think, our ESAT scores on tooling from like low 30s to high 70s in basically a one or two quarters. So that's the system I'm most proud of working on.
Terrific. And then Jen, how about you? Which system are you the proudest of?
Yeah, great question. I think the one that I'm the most proud of is actually one that technically failed. And it kind of just morphed into other projects. So a couple of years ago, I was working on a project that was meant to generate differential diagnoses for doctors. So it would take a combination of your patient data from an electronic health record, perform some machine learning on it, and then also take some knowledge from actual medical literature and incorporate that in to make a recommendation. And in trying to build that, we uncovered so many different things that we did not have the capabilities for, that we had to actually build or buy in order to make the product work. And we tried to build some of those. One of them was a machine learning platform that would basically keep your data very secure. Patient data is very regulated across different countries, and it can't leave certain countries. So this would allow data scientists to work on it from wherever they were. A very complex system that technically ended up failing, but morphed into other projects that the company still uses. So that's one I'm very proud of.
Fantastic. Reggie, how about you?
Absolutely. I'm thinking about when I was at Home Depot. When I was at Home Depot, we had a huge problem, kind of similar to what Andrew was kind of referring to, with just taking a long time for developers to actually test in dev environments, because we were just using a bunch of synchronous processes and stuff like that. So I just kind of took it upon myself and actually just went and built it with like some Golang and some newer technologies. Granted, it caused a big ruckus with the CTO. He wasn't the biggest fan of it. But at the end of the day, it took us from hours for developers to be able to test in dev environment to literal minutes. So it was one of those situations where, the work kind of spoke for itself versus it being the thing where we had to go back and forth and do all of the things. So that's the one I'm most proud of.
Very cool. And then Sophie, will come to you last again, but what are you proudest of and what was the impact?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I led the web platform and advertising programs within Skyscanner. And when I first joined, the engineering organization was paralyzed. We'd grown significantly, but we're still operating with a big ball of mud monolith. And the usual story applies. Poor testing, poor separation of concerns, lots of concurrent changes from new and inexperienced engineers led to a system that couldn't be deployed without significant manual QA validation. So we literally stopped all deployments of the Skyscanner website for 3 months between January and March after a Christmas code freeze, which was designed to mitigate risk, which effectively just caused a huge backup of changes that we couldn't safely deploy. So we decided pretty early that the current monolith wouldn't scale, And instead, we built out a system leveraging Varnish, which we bought, and edge side includes to componentize every widget on the site. This allowed us to go from, at best, one release every 1 month to dozens of releases per day across any team who owned any feature on the website. By deconstructing this monolith, we were able to resource development of cross-cutting concerns, for example, monitoring performance, mobile optimization, caching, while leaving individual engineering teams responsible to optimize their parts of the traveler's journey. And I think it's important to recognize and remember that we can usually always build on top of something that we buy. So it doesn't have to be an either or. And I think knowing where to buy and then where to grow on top of is a really useful skill for engineering leaders.
Definitely. All right. So then let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the start of a project. And then, Sophie, maybe you can start off. I'll come to you first with this question, since you've been the last of the last two. What are some key steps you take as a leader to set a build up for success?
Yeah, I think for me, it's being really clear what success is and then reevaluating after each milestone wherever there is a better way to achieve that success than your current plan. Okay. Your definition of success should always be the destination that you're going to, but your path to this destination should not be fixed. If you discover a better path during the journey, you should absolutely feel empowered to take that path. And then I think just going on to the milestone part, identifying those key milestones and especially key integration points early. When building new software, the integrations are often overlooked or assumed to be simple. And if I had $1 for every time someone told me integration would be simple, and they're most often when things inevitably go wrong. So my guidance to any engineering leader would be focus on the integrations as early as you possibly can.
Cool. And then, Jen, how about throwing that question to you as well? Like, what do you do to set a build up for success?
I think Sophie covered it really, really well. I think transparency and communication is going to be a recurring theme in a lot of the stuff that we talk about today. So that's a big one. I think one red flag I've seen in the past is, especially if you're building something in-house, making sure that you have that transparent communication to leadership and stakeholders, whether that's other internal teams that are going to use the product, and making sure that you do demos early and often at each piece, each step of the way and each milestone.
Cool, yeah. So I think, communication is a really important one. And so let's maybe take this from start at the director or the VP level. So maybe Andrew, what are you looking for in terms of communication from a team that's working on a build?
So the way I think about communication is I'd actually take one step back and say, when I start out projects or teams or anything, I start from what does the team believe? Why do they exist? And what is their value system? And then everything about communication back to me has to be framed in that way. And the reason I do that is because I want the team to be opinionated about the value trade-off they're making, and that the thing that they're doing is going in lockstep to that. Example of this I would use is we're doing this massive data center migration in a previous life. It was moving probably 10,000 to 20,000 machines, an exabyte of storage from one region to another region, not in AWS physical machines. Team initially came in and said, we are going to do this. Here's a spreadsheet of every single owner in the company. We're going to email them. We're going to do this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can see it was a little bit of an incredulous look on my face at the time. This is the plan. And the only question I asked them, I said, okay, so we believe infrastructure exists, our purpose is to maximize product velocity sustainably, and we need to do it in a trustworthy, efficient, and reliable manner. And just kind of looked at the team and said, can you map what you just told me to that? And that was it. The design review was over in 30 seconds. They said, we'll come back in 2 weeks and we'll figure this out. Came back with a completely different plan that was mapped to that. And it just changed the narrative almost immediately. And so I did that with OKRs. I do that with every single email I send. I use, that's what I expect from the team, is to use that framework and map it back to that. So that's my sort of high level framework. It starts at the org level down to the team level. I think it can ladder up and down the entire chain from a line manager all the way up to VP or CTO.
Terrific. And then Reggie, do you have any thoughts on that? Communication between teams and leadership. What successful communication look like to you?
To piggyback on what Andrew said, I love the fact that he brought up having a framework to operate within, right? Having a way of thinking how to go about the problem. I think that's huge. Sometimes being on the other side of things, I think sometimes the leadership doesn't think so much about that, about how it needs to be framed, because at the end of the day, we want to deliver the best product for you, right? And I want to make sure I'm communicating with you at the level that you're actually communicating on. So having that framework to operate within, that helps a lot. It helps a lot. And also, I wanted to also give note to Sophie when she talked about recognizing key integration points early. I think that's big, as well as being able to pull in all of the proper teams that need to be involved, bringing them in early too, because there's nothing like beginning a build and then all of a sudden you having to say, oh, well, we need this team over here, and they're like, oh no, well, we don't have time, or we don't have it in our schedule to do that, stuff like that. But if you let them know early, then they can at least kind of plan for, hey, we know we need to work with this team on this build, on this part of it, things like that. So I think those are all really good points.
Cool. And then Jen, anything to add?
Yeah, like Reggie said, making sure that those milestones and the plan that you set up front is communicated to all the teams involved from the get-go, right? There shouldn't be anything hidden behind the scenes. And you should be getting that commitment from each of your teams as well, and making sure that they have the confidence to hit those milestones. Because if they don't, then you really need to reevaluate the plan.
Yeah. And then Andrew, how about?
I just realized something as we were kind of running through this and just listening to the backgrounds of everyone. And I think a lot of this should be contextualized as I think most of us work at or have worked or are giving at least advice that's at like scaled organizations. And I think a lot of this advice is completely different in hypergrowth. And in a lot of ways, you have to throw the rule book out. And so I think it's important to frame that, because I think that you have like a split. I've seen failure mode of take the advice I've just heard like this panel give and say, try to map it to an organization that's like growing like week over week. It just doesn't work. So I think that would be the one sort of flag I give us.
Yes. Cool. So we're kind of talking about like setting the team up and setting up, communication, and like at the start of a project, one thing you have to do as a leader is think about staffing. Who is going to be on this team and doing this build, and across the phases of development, from like, the pre-implementation through implementing, rollout, and support phases. So maybe let's start with Reggie. What's on your mind when you're thinking about the appropriate makeup of a build team?
When I'm thinking about the appropriate makeup of a team, number one, is there any type of excitement about the build that's about to come up? Because we can talk technical skill, we can talk all of these other things, right? But if you're not truly excited about what you're trying to do or what's about to go on, or have not even necessarily excitement, maybe just an innate interest in what's about to be built, I think that can cause problems down the line. Because I've seen it to where you bring people onto a team and they have no interest in what's going on. And if you got a team of 5, you got 3 or 4 people that aren't interested in what's going on, you're going to put a whole lot on 1 or 2 people to get all of this work done. And at the beginning, if they would express, hey, I don't want to do this or anything like that, like, you could have solved a lot of problems, saved a lot of time. So out the gate, I'm just having people around that are actually interested in working on it, that are excited about working on it, and want to work with the people around them. I think that's huge.
Definitely. I'm identifying examples of that in my mind when I've been asked to do those things. Cool. And then how about Sophie? What are you thinking about when looking at teams and structure?
Yeah, so when I think of sort of the pre-implementation stage, I like to start with a group of cross-team experts. So rather than having one team own a project, I like to say we'll have a representative from all the teams, and this is my focus on integration points. And then once that high level has been vetted, staff out the implementation teams. But +1 to Reggie, I generally am very passionate about staffing implementation teams on a volunteer basis. So effectively saying, this is the project, who wants to be involved? And obviously, you won't always get all the people you need, but you can go a long way to success by letting people self-select into their own futures.
Definitely. Cool. And so then, again, let's stay at the beginning of the project. then let's go maybe start with you, Sophie. How detailed do you want a technical design to be pre-implementation
So this,
versus, yeah.
yeah, this is a great question. And I'm generally very detailed when it comes to integrations, unsurprisingly, API contracts and SLAs. And then I'm not detailed at all when it comes to internal implementation details, because honestly, they can change as much as you like and it won't matter. It's interesting because this is typically the exact opposite of what I see in most design documents, where we have a tendency to focus all the detail on the bits we control rather than the bits that we'll have to adapt to in future. And I find that a really fascinating sort of approach from many engineering leaders, to spend a lot of time on the things that are effectively the easy bits.
Yeah, definitely. And then how about you, Jen? What are you wanting to see or what detail level are you looking for towards the beginning of a project?
Yeah, towards the beginning, I really just want to know what the context of the system is, who the users are, what the integration points are. Nothing super high leveled, but as much detail as the team is really sure of, including what they don't know, right? If they don't know, how many users they're going to have to support yet, like call that out, because we need to make sure that we follow up on that later.
Yeah. Cool. So then we're getting started, we're getting going. And one of the things you have to do as a leader is keep an eye on things. So let's maybe turn to you, Andrew. What do you look for? What are the warning signs to you that a build might be going off track? And then are there guides or tripwires you put in place to catch those things?
So I think a big part of the job is information flow, both up in every direction, up, down, sideways, like diagonally, like you name it. The direction flow is important. The framework, I mean, in a larger organization, so the framework I like to run effectively a monthly business review that kind of covers at altitude what's happening against OKRs. I look at that as is the plan of record on track? And then also independently from that, sort of metrics reviews, which are sort of deep dive into systems, and then also budget versus actual, sort of the budget side of the world as well. Leadership team in all of those meetings is when I say leadership team, technical leadership combined with manager, because I think that there is a tendency for managers to paint a rosy picture upwards, and I want to know the actual sort of gory details of what's happening. I personally also am a huge believer in anybody that's ever worked for me. Like I just think all meeting notes have to go to a centralized mailing list. I don't like meeting notes that just go to sort of the cabal that was building the project. I voraciously read everything, as well as like almost every code review. I think even at Dropbox, when there's like a couple hundreds of engineers, I'm still probably reading almost every code commit and every single code review. It's not best practice. I'm not recommending this, but like that, I tend to just like be able to I build a mental model of that and then use that as my sort of it becomes an intuition in some ways. Just triangulate on like here's probably a problem from those type of reviews, as well as looking at sort of the great details. I think it's an art more than a science, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Sophie, how about you? What are you looking for to get a sense of how things are really going?
So generally, when it comes to like tripwires, I get very wary of demos that are very polished on the front end but don't do anything on the back end, or demos that are not open. So lots of people can play with them at the same time. So if an engineer is demoing to me, but they're the only person who can click all the buttons, it's like that's a little bit of a warning sign. And then I also get concerned when status is only provided in verbal meetings. And I think this is similar to Andrew. I strongly prefer written down status, because it becomes very easy when you're just doing verbal status for all of you to leave a room thinking, for me as the director to be, we're on track, everything's going well, and the engineering manager to be, yep, I told her it's completely off track, and that's just a recipe for problems for everyone. So write it down often, share it, we don't need to keep things secret, and just make sure that communication flows, to Andrew's point, in every direction possible.
Yeah, definitely. And then Jen, how about you? Anything that you either pattern match against or that you proactively do to catch things?
So I think one big red flag to watch out for is any sort of dissent between two different parties. Like if the project manager is saying that everything's on track, we're green light, but the engineers are saying, why was this a green light? Like we're totally blocked and stuck. That's a huge red flag. So any miscommunications there, I really watch out for. Also with the demos, I think that's the biggest thing. If you can't show your work and kind of show where you are, then that's a huge red flag for me too.
Yeah. All right. So projects are up and running. Now, something that can happen is you join a team, you join a project that's already in flow. So, Reggie, let's start with you this time. If you're taking over a team mid-build, what do you like to do to ramp up quickly on the state of a project?
First thing I'm really gonna want to do is really have a conversation with all of the team, with everybody on the team, about what are the potential problems, what are the problems right now. I think that's usually the big one, right? So getting on the team, asking questions like, okay, where are we at? What are the problems? Have we been in communication with other teams about getting unblocked on these issues? Have we communicated this to upper management about, hey, we're blocked here, we need more resources, and really trying to make sure we get unblocked on whatever the issues that we are currently having are, like, as soon as possible, so that we can kind of get back into that space of like, let's being productive, hitting milestones, so on and so forth. So first things first is like, what are the issues?
Cool. And then Jen, you've mentioned you've been changing roles lately. I imagine you've maybe stepped into something like this. What do you do to ramp up on the current state of a project in flight?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I do is look for any type of documents that exist and read through as much as I can, but I take that all with a grain of salt because documents can always come out of date. So I try to get all the background I can on anything that's written first, but then, I make sure that I talk to the team and just kind of get their perspective on what's going on. And not just the team leadership. I make sure to talk to the engineers on the team. I also look at any metrics that are available, but again, taking them with a grain of salt. Like, what's the team's lead time? Things like that. Our release is going smoothly, and how long does the build time take? That sort of thing.
Yeah. Sophie, anything to add on to that?
I think that pretty much summed it, but I think the one thing I would say is that I very much try not to take over or challenge what has been done before. If the team has a plan, I let the team execute and I work out where I can help. I am a very strong believer that imperfect decisions made by an aligned team are better than perfect decisions made by a misaligned team. So if the team is already aligned on a destination, it is entirely not my job to cause any sort of chaos there and just gently nudge the team, perhaps in a better way of execution, but keeping them very much focused and on track.
Terrific, yes. So then let's move again further along the timeline of our project. The rollout, the launch. Let's maybe go with Andrew to start this one, but how do you weigh up when is the right time to launch a new system in production? And how do you assure a smooth rollout?
I would say, you're looking for some business impact, and that business impact has like a certain time frame that you need to deliver it at. So in some ways, it's not a choice. It's like, what does the business demand? And the system may not be ready, but you may have to launch it because you have to derive some business impact from it. Because if you don't do it, revenue is going to be at X, right? or the system is going to continue to degrade. So I think that's like a very important context, is understand the why you're doing this problem in the first place, and that sets, like, to me, that's your you need to know that on day one. You need to know at least the ballpark of when it needs to be out there. And then the way I look at it tends to be, let the team make sure the team knows that and understands the business context, and they will typically tell you when is the right time to launch it based on a set of requirements that they put together. That's the way I am, and we're literally going through this right now. That's what I tend to do. I ask them for this: what is the success criteria metrics for it? Like, what's the business impacting metric you're looking to drive, and then what are your guardrails? And then any risk has to be framed against the fact that you're going to miss a business impacting metric or guardrail metric. And anything else is not a risk. The team just needs to loop internally to figure out how to mitigate anything else they think is a perceived risk. But if it doesn't ladder up to those, it doesn't, unknown unknowns happen, and any known unknown that goes against that risk, they just need to mitigate. And that's kind of how I look at it. It's pretty high level, but I don't think there's any other way than empowering the team to do it.
Yeah. And then any tips for making the rollout go well?
Tips for making the rollout go well. Ramp it up. Don't do big bang launches never typically go well. Lots of proactive communication. Do your pre-mortem. Make sure that you have given the team some space between like the last minute sort of go crazy to get this thing done to the let's launch it. Like I tend to like let the team pause a day or two. Like you don't want to be code complete on Friday, launch on Monday. That's usually a little bit of a recipe for disaster, but you don't want to wait 3 weeks either. You probably want to let them a little bit of a breather because it could, things happen. And then make sure you've got the right roles in place going into that. You may have had to swap staffing or change staffing as you get closer. I think that's something to watch out for, is that the people that 0 to 1 may not be 1 to 2 or 1 to 5. And so you may need to change the leadership earlier in the process than you may expect.
Interesting. I'm curious, you mentioned pre-mortem as a tool. What does the good pre-mortem look like to you? What are you looking for in that?
I am looking for, if I had to think through the thought process I'm looking for there, I am looking for them to assume sort of the worst case scenarios and kind of work backwards from that. That's the typical way I sort of approach it. And then I will actually, I do like to, and I have seen, there's 2 other tools. One is a red team against it. I like to take a team of engineers that have never looked at the project before or read the code and have them do that. And the other is, we lose this for a major launch in the past. There's very good frameworks from the actual world of engineering, not the engineers that we call ourselves, but like the engineers that carry an actual license to do this. There are frameworks that have existed from the 50s and 60s. FMEA is like one that we've used in the past. So it's like a failure mode analysis. Those work. They're heavyweight processes, but they're a way that you can kind of get a pre-mortem done. It's definitely not, I would not recommend it for everything. It is definitely a 10,000 row spreadsheet that you're going to spend the better part of 3 months doing, but it really depends on the scale of the launch.
Yeah, cool. And so then, Jen, how about you? What are you weighing up when thinking about launching?
Yeah, to touch on the pre-mortem that Andrew was talking about, so in weighing the risk of launching, it kind of depends on your product as well. So one of the products I worked on in the past was data collection for clinical trials. So heavily regulated space, and everything has to work as expected before it is launched. So in order to do that, each story that we had, we would do it was a risk analysis of, okay, what parts of the system is this changing? And what is the risk associated with that? We had a risk framework that was high, medium, or low. And depending on that level, that would determine sort of who needed to look at it, who needed to review and approve, and also make customers aware of that change as well.
Yeah, definitely. So then, Reggie, I'll throw this in your direction. What are you thinking about when thinking about launches and setting your team up for success with the rollout?
So whenever I'm thinking about setting my team up for success, I like to begin when we begin the project, I would like to create a checklist of things that we would like to see done in order for this thing to get pushed to production. So from there, I'm thinking about documentation, rollback plans, have it communicate to the proper teams, have it communicate to customers. When we roll this thing out, can we roll it out to just can we just do a canary deployment? right? Because I want to try to reduce the blast radius as much as we can as we learn about this new thing that we're rolling out into production. And I want people to build confidence in releasing it. I think sometimes, like Andrew said, when you do a big bang, it usually doesn't go well. And it's because there's so many variables changing at one time. So when we go into releases, like I want to have a checklist of things like documentation, proper parties, rollback plans, everything already in place. So even if we do release and it goes completely left, we know at least how to get it back to its original state. And we kind of feel confident about like, all right, it didn't go the way we wanted to. All right, let's just take a step back. So that's usually a big one. I want to feel very, very confident going into a release. I don't like anxiety going into a release.
Definitely. So then one option that can exist when you're building something custom is not actually using your own engineering team for it, but bringing in a team of external engineers to support the build. And so I'm wondering maybe, Sophie, I don't think you spoke to the last question. So when have you seen that work well, and how do you set that up?
Yeah, so we actually at Pinterest and also in previous companies, we extensively use external engineering to support our builds. And I would say you typically see them fall into two modes of operation. The first is providing specific expertise to an existing team who are taking on a new complex area of work that they don't historically have experience of. So to give you really concrete recent examples, they might be consultants in data engineering or privacy preserving ML. Right. As I said at the start of the call, privacy is the talk of 2021, and we're all learning how to do it. And then I think the second way I've leveraged external consultants is scaling an existing engineering team temporarily. So this is used most effectively when the work is well understood by the existing team, but there's a need to deliver faster than the optimal team size would achieve, but without increasing the long-term cost basis for the team. Right. So if I can double the size of a team for 12 months, but not have to worry about what I do with those engineers 12 months from now, that's really beneficial when you're in that sort of growing stage of your systems.
Yeah. And are there things you do to set those builds up for success?
Yeah, so generally I will make sure that the consultants will come on site. That's obviously been a little harder in the last year or so with COVID, but we try to make sure they're on site for at least the first couple of months, working with the teams really closely. And then if they are in a remote location, overlap in time zones, making sure we're really clear on deliverables, making sure we're really clear on measurement and expectations in the same way that we would be for a sort of full-time employee. And then I guess one of the messages from this panel overall is continuous communication. So if things aren't working out, don't hide the fact that it's not working out, just say so and move forward from there.
Terrific, yeah. And so then let's take a step and think about customers. And I think, Andrew, maybe I'll point this to you to start off with, because you were giving an example of this. Quite often we're lucky that our customers are internal teams, that the people that are going to be using the things we're building, we can go and talk to because they are in the same building or in the same company, at least these days. So how do you evaluate requirements and feedback from internal customers for your build?
I think it's actually very similar to it's a product, right? It doesn't matter if it's an internal piece of software or an external piece of software. It's still a product that you're delivering to someone. So I think that you're scaling up and scaling down a set of tools that product management is going to typically use in all circumstances, whether it's collect qualitative feedback, whether it's user experience study, whether it's like painting the user journey. It's the same. To me, it's the same toolkit. I've had PMs in infrastructure before that PM internal products as well as PM external products. So I tend to just use and leverage the PM organization for that. I think it's, if I think of the toolkit, it's going to be the surveys, it's going to be sit down, pair, like literally go. You have this huge advantage if it's an internal product where you can literally sit and watch, record it, screen capture it, listen to it. Like today, in today's world, like Gong calls, if you're not using Gong, well, this is for external, but Gong calls are great, but you can probably leverage technology internally as well, to kind of just like get the transcript, read it. When I was at AOL way back when I started my career, every time we did a release to the community at large, the teams would literally get into a conference room and have pizza on a Friday night and listen to the call center calls. And so to me, that was sort of like my beginning of like, okay, you have to do this even internally. That's my sort of, I tend to be, it's more of a cultural thing. It's, you have to get the team to go and talk, and it can't be, I go heads down and do this. And so, in all of my teams, typically they have like an inclusive value. And I think of the inclusive value also is it's all the aspects that people normally think about it, but it's also the aspect of you have to go include your customer in the conversation. Otherwise, I don't know what you're building for. So to me, that's like the question I ask all the time is like, did you talk to the customer yet? And is the customer in the room while we do a design review or while we do a business review? So I tend to make sure that all the meeting notes get CC'd or at least forwarded to them with context. That's the other sort of thing I do for that.
Very cool. Jen, how about you when handling internal customers?
Yeah, getting that buy-in is super important, and not just from leadership, but from the actual teams that might need to make a change as a result of what you're working on. I can't tell you the amount of times, having worked at large companies, that we've had teams start building something only to figure out later that another team has already built it or was in the process of building it. And you don't want to have to reconcile those things after the fact. You want to do that up front. So definitely talk to your stakeholders early and often.
Yeah, definitely. And Sophie, anything to add there?
I think Andrew and Jen nailed it, but I'll just add one piece, which is the single fastest way to build in effectively for an internal audience is to assume you know what success is without talking to them. So don't do that. And it happens all the time. So It's not like this is an uncommon problem. But the number of times, and I think Jen was alluding to it, and I'm sure we've all experienced it, where teams are like, oh, we built this really great thing for you. And it's like, we don't need it and we don't want it. And that's just bad for everyone.
Yeah. And then I'll come to you, Reggie. Anything else to add? Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, you have to market validate even within your own company. That's kind of the whole thing. Like, especially being on a team where we specifically focus on building tooling for an internal audience, like you got to talk to people first. You got to talk to them and actually find out, is this going to be useful? So market validation is real, even if it's just for your peers. So absolutely.
Cool. All right. So I think we're coming up on time now. So I hope that it's given everyone in our audience good food for thought about how you'll communicate, plan, and structure your next build and increase the chances of your team's success.